Now, the Nintendo 3DS isn't the most powerful of systems, it being last gen and a handheld, it's not going to be very powerful. But what it lacks in power, it makes up for in spades with the great experiences you can have. There are a ton of great games on the Nintendo 3DS, and these things are friggin' troopers. I've had a 3DS for, probably like 5 or 4 years now, and this thing has taken a beating. Yeah, that battery is not the most stable, but it still boots up just fine. And to put into perspective just how not powerful the 3DS is, the minimum spec for Windows 7 is 2 gigs of RAM. The Nintendo 3DS, get ready for this, has 128 megs. It would take 15 and some change 3DSs to run Windows 7. And that's not even the most up-to-date version. That's the minimum spec you can use to get Steam running. Now, what if I told you there was an open-world, online, first-person shooter with voice chat for the Nintendo 3DS? Well, you'd probably call me crazy. Now, what if I told you it was made by an indie developer? You'd call me insane. This is the story of IceStationz, a game that had plenty of potential but had fallen down by the wayside. Let's get into the beginning of it. Before we can talk about the game and the community that formed around it as well as launch day, we have to talk about the development cycle. So, I couldn't find very much information on the development cycle itself, and the scant information I did find was made on Assold forums about 9 years ago, so I don't know if this information is true or not, but from just other things, context clues, that kind of stuff around the game, what I can tell is that it was a brutal development cycle. This game, it's a miracle that it came out in the first place, being a new studio with, quite frankly, Spartan hardware even for 2016 standards, 128 megs of RAM is barely anything, along with the Tegra graphics chip, that's not much either, and a dual-core processor. Dual-core processors have been in the works since roughly the 1990s. There's not much to work with there, and combined with the fact that the game never made it past version 1.2, all this added together just makes me think that this game, developing it, must have been hell. So what about the launch date of IceStationz? Well, there isn't any information to speak of, as you can see from this Google autofill, but how it probably went was small amount of hype for this game, because this, mostly, and it's $4, so why not buy it? A bunch of people bought it, put it down after a week. That's probably how it went. The graphics were always a big sticking point for this game, even at launch. So what about the reviews? Almost every game gets reviewed by Metacritic/IGN, and just a bunch of other stuff. What about the reviews? What did they say? Yeah, the reviewers didn't quite like this one, but to be fair, if it ain't Witcher 3, IGN isn't having it. So recently, in 2016 to today, we've seen a resurgence in kind of retro-styled graphics. There are games that do it right, and then there are games that don't quite hit the mark. For example, Minecraft. They did it right. The textures are simple, but they're pleasant to look at the same time. Infiniminer? That's too dark, man. They didn't quite hit the mark. But IceStationz didn't really have the option to make their graphics look better. They were kind of stuck in limbo with these polygon graphics that they couldn't do much about. Because I've said this many, many times in this video, and I will say it again, the 3DS hardware is really, really limiting. And yeah, I'm going to use Infiniminer and Minecraft for another example, but Minecraft, it just works. There's something about it, and cute, everything's a block, deal with it. But in Infiniminer, it just looks weird. The ground is 32-bit, the characters are 16-bit, something ain't adding up. And yet some of these graphics-related issues were in Wobbly Tooth's control. For example, the game is really, really dark, like unnecessarily dark. I remember playing this around launch date, and it was downright hard to see even in just normal lighting. So, if you bump up the saturation of things just a little bit, you could make the game look immensely better. And second off, that little fog of war effect that's there is completely unnecessary, and it was even shown in a couple posts around the internet that you can remove this and the performance isn't hurt at all. So some of these things were still in Wobbly Tooth's control, and they just made some kind of poor decisions. And IceStationz doesn't have very much character development, which is another sticking point. In fact, I'd argue that there's none at all. I mean, what do you really have? Generic person in red coat with gun, and uh-oh, here comes generic zombie to kill player person thing. There's not much there. I mean, I'm going to make another analogy, but it just makes the most sense for this kind of thing. You have Call of Duty 2 and Team Fortress 2. They were both released around... What do you remember from Call of Duty 2? Probably not much. Maybe a map here or so. But what do you remember from Team Fortress 2? Even today, it's still called the gateway to PC gaming. It's beloved by many, and a lot of people can just name things off the top of their head. For example, Heavy's that one burly Russian dude with a big gun that enjoys sandwiches, and Scout's that one little sarcastic asshole running around the map. But I guess my main point of this is that Valve didn't make a game that looked good at the time. They made a game with interesting characters and a timeless art style. So finally, the community that was built around IceStationz. So, yeah, I couldn't get any first-hand information for this because, as you can see, the battery in my 3DS, yeah, it's not doing too hot. But from what I can see of the community, unless you're in a private lobby nowadays, mostly what you're going to find is pedos going into public lobbies looking for smaller children, because they can't go on any mainstream social media sites, otherwise, you know, bad. And as of Thursday, November 5th, 2020, the game still averages 15 to 20 people online every single day, mostly around 11 p.m. or the later hours of the day, but it still averages 15 to 20 people and the servers are still up. So, in conclusion, IceStationz was a flawed game, but a fun one at that, and if it was ported to the Switch with in-game voice chat, not Nintendo's weird, terrible, shoehorned-in solution, it would probably do damn well on the Nintendo eShop. You've watched the entire video, which means I'm willing to wager a bet that you enjoyed it, and if that's true, why not smack that sub button? Because if you do, you can look forward to not quite set in stone videos that happen at least once a week, and monthly projects which come out usually on the last day of the month, and have some premium content in them. But if you've already smacked that sub button and don't know what to do with your life, why not click on God's Favorite Playlist, my most updated playlist with recent videos. See ya.